completed, God judged the world, cleansing the earth from unrighteousness with a flood for 40 days. Now, the reason why the 40-day flood took place is that the number 40 represented separating the earth from Satan. Why 40? It comes from the 10 generations after the failure of Adam's family. The 10 generations to cleanse and prepare the world for a second family taking the same mission. Each of those generations is represented by a 4-position foundation. Hence the number 40. 10 generations times 4 is a number that represents separating from Satan. It's for this reason that there were 40 days and 40 nights of flood to cleanse the earth. And we can find many examples of central figures. Moses' 40 years in the wilderness of Midian, and Moses' 40 years in the palace of Pharaoh. 3 times, actually, Moses, 40 years. Also, Moses fasting 40 days in order to receive the 10 commandments. Jesus also fasted 40 days, and we can find other examples of this in the Bible. Also, we can understand more significance to the story as well. Remember this story. After the 40 days and nights of flood, the ark came to rest on the top of Mount Ararat. And Noah, the Bible says Noah cast out a raven that was to fly about the earth until the waters were gone. 7 days later, Moses sends a dove out of the ark to see if the land is dry and the dove can alight on earth. But the dove returns, and Noah understands the waters are still on earth, the raven's still flying about, and they remain in the ark. 7 days later, he sends the dove again. The dove returns, unable to find a landing place, but this time with an olive branch in its mouth. 7 days later, Noah sends the dove a 3rd time. The dove does not return. Noah understands the waters are gone, the raven's dominion is gone, the dove has established a place on earth, and Noah, his family, and the animals come out. What does this suggest? In fact, it foreshadows the process of God's providence of restoration. The ark representing God's ideal, the raven cast out from it obviously represents Satan. The waters on earth that remain as long as the raven is there are evil dominion. The first dove cast out is Adam, God's first attempt to bring his ideal of creation onto the earth, which had no foundation. The second dove represents the second Adam, or Jesus. Again, the ideal of creation wasn't able to be established on the earth, but this dove returns with an olive branch, could gain something. And similarly, at the time of Jesus, even though he was rejected, Jesus was able to establish the foundation for spiritual salvation through his death and resurrection by offering himself. The third dove represents the third attempt, the third Adam, ultimately Christ's return. And here, the ideal is established, means the waters are gone, evil dominion is gone, the raven is gone, and God's ideal can come out of the ark and be established on the earth. Now, this doesn't mean that this was predestined or controlled, but it foreshadows and teaches us the principled process by which God works in the history of restoration. So let's continue. The purpose of the ark and the judgment of 40 days and 40 nights was to eliminate sinful humanity in order to raise up a family who would relate only with God, to separate good and evil. Through the 40-day judgment, Noah's family offered the ark in a manner acceptable to God and restored through indemnity the foundation of faith. So through this condition, they restored the natural world, represented with the animals and creation in the ark, and symbolically restored the human beings in this situation as well, so that God could work with and through them. Now let's look at the foundation of substance after the ark. This had to be a substantial offering involving the changing of heart through unity amongst the human beings. So upon the foundation of Noah's offering, Noah's sons, Shem and Ham, were to have stood in the position of Cain and Abel respectively. And through their unity, the foundation of substance should have been accomplished. Had they succeeded in the substantial offering, by fulfilling the condition to remove fallen nature, they would have laid the foundation of substance, thus restoring the foundation for good children, thus restoring the foundation for parents, and thus the original parent, the true parent, the Messiah, the everlasting Father, could come, engraft all people to himself. At that time, and regenerate humanity and fulfill God's ideal. Now let's consider then how this process took place. What took place in Adam's family according to the biblical record? For Noah's family to make an acceptable, substantial offering, then Ham, Noah's second son in the position of Abel, and the central figure of this substantial offering was to restore the position of Abel by winning the heart and raising up his brothers as the condition for the substantial offering. However, there's an important difference between the position of Ham that he was in and the position Abel was in 10 generations earlier. In Adam's family, Abel had successfully made the symbolic offering in the place of his father. He was the one whom God trusted and raised up. Abel already had a foundation for God to work through him. And therefore, he automatically could stand as God's representative and the central figure for the substantial offering. However, in the case of Noah's family, it was Noah, the father, not Ham, the son, who was trusted by God. When all others questioned, doubted, and accused why this crazy man was building a boat in the middle of the mountains, Noah displayed faith. And through 120 years, as described in the Bible, as reckoned biblically, Noah could stand in the position of being trusted by God. Now, Ham was not in that position of trust. He had to therefore inherit Noah's position of faith and trust by becoming one in heart with his father. Therefore, for Ham to stand in the position of Abel, he had to become inseparably one in heart with his father Noah, who had made the symbolic offering. Let's consider exactly how that was to take place. The Bible says that after the flood judgment, Noah was a vineyard keeper. And one day, having tasted a little bit too much of the product, Noah came home tipsy or drunk, and he laid naked in his tent. And the Bible says that Ham, the second son, saw his father's nakedness, went and called his brothers, and they backed toward their father, unwilling to look at his nakedness, and covered him up. Let's examine how God worked through this situation to give Ham the opportunity to demonstrate oneness. The Bible reports that when Ham saw his father lying naked in his tent, his action was one of shame. He felt ashamed, and he stirred up the same feelings in his brothers, Shem and Japheth. Swayed by Ham to feel ashamed of their father's nakedness, they covered their father's body with a garment. Then Noah awoke from his sleep, and the Bible says he cursed Ham and his descendants. Why would he rebuke Ham? Because this act constituted a sin. So Noah rebuked and cursed Ham. But why was it a sin? Please remember, from the principle, sin means a condition for Satan to have give and take or to invade. What was it about Ham's action and attitude that allowed Satan to re-enter and involve himself with the situation? When Ham felt ashamed of his father's nakedness, this resembled Adam and Eve's shame after the fall. See, Noah, in this originally restored world with evil cleansed, had an innocence that reflected Adam and Eve's attitude prior to the fall. But Ham's shame reflected Adam and Eve's shame, out of which they covered their lower parts. Ham thus made a condition for Satan to enter. His feeling and act constituted a sin. Consequently, Ham could not restore through indemnity the position of Abel for the substantial offering. From another standpoint, we can consider Ham's action as a repetition of the four fallen natures. Number one, he couldn't see his father from God's point of view. The entire family had doubted Noah. The people had mocked and laughed at him as he built this crazy ark in the middle of the mountains. But when the rain came, people should have understood that Noah was righteous and that he represented God. But Ham lost faith in his father, couldn't see him as God saw him. Secondly, he left his position, put himself above his father by judging him, judging his action, and multiplied his attitude toward his brothers. In this way, he nullified the foundation to inherit Noah's position of faith, and he couldn't stand in the position as the central figure for the foundation of substance. So let's look at the failure of God's providence of restoration in the family of Noah, exactly what took place and how. Ham failed to restore through indemnity the position of Abel for the substantial offering, and thus could not establish the foundation of substance. The providence of restoration in Noah's family ended ultimately in failure in this way. Now let's consider the third providential family and our final point for today's discussion: the providence of restoration in the family of Abraham. First, the foundation of faith. Now, for Abraham's family to make a foundation of faith, we need first a central figure, a central person. We know that originally it was Adam's family that was to establish the foundation to receive the Messiah. When Adam's family failed, God worked through 10 generations, measured in the Bible as 1,600 years, to prepare a second family that stood in the same position. When Noah's family could not accomplish the foundation for the Messiah, another 10 generations, reckoned in the Bible as 400 years, was necessary to make the foundation for Abraham's family. So a 2,000-year period of Adam, Noah, and Abraham, 3 families. In the providence of restoration in Abraham's family, the central figure for the foundation of faith was who? Was Abraham, of course. However, Abraham could not inherit this mission unless he first restored through indemnity all the conditions which had been given to Noah to fulfill. Likewise, Abraham was to inherit the mission of Noah and thus the mission of Adam. In this capacity, he represented a restored Adam. And as God had blessed Adam, be fruitful, multiply, etc., and he also had given Noah the same blessing after the ark and flood judgment, God also blessed Abraham. We read in the 12th chapter of Genesis, "I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. And through you all families of the earth shall bless themselves." Because through Abraham's descendant, the Messiah was meant to come, and all families of the earth should link into that original lineage. Now, secondly, we need an offering through the creation. So let's examine the object for the condition offered for the foundation of faith by Abraham. God commanded Abraham to offer a dove, a ram, and a heifer as the condition for his symbolic offering to restore the foundation of faith. So remember, through this offering, Abraham was symbolically restoring the cosmos, or the whole creation, and at the same time, this offering represented his heart, and he was making a condition to restore human beings as well. So what's the meaning, the significance of Abraham's offering in 3 parts? What was the significance of the symbolic offering? The offering was an object for the condition to restore, first of all that Adam's family was supposed to accomplish through Cain and Abel's sacrifices. It was also the condition to restore all that Noah's family was trying to accomplish through the dispensation of the ark. So these 3 providential families were all, in a sense, being restored through the indemnity condition being offered through Abraham's sacrifice. So let's consider why then these 3 sacrifices and what they symbolized. These 3 sacrifices symbolize the cosmos, which is completed through 3 stages of the growing period, just as Noah was commanded to build the ark with 3 decks. The dove represented the formation stage, the ram, the growth stage, and the heifer, the completion stage. Now, why did Abraham place these 3 offerings on one altar? Because Abraham was supposed to restore all at once in his action the long historical providence which God had conducted through 3 providential generations. Adam as the formation stage, Noah as the growth stage, and Abraham himself as the completion stage. In other words, Abraham was working to restore horizontally, meaning in his own lifetime, life experience, these inherited conditions, vertical conditions, the unfulfilled conditions of the past, inherited for Abraham to complete. Let's then consider how Abraham made the symbolic offering and the problem that arose. According to the Bible, Abraham was to divide the offerings in half, lay the right half on top of the left in order to make a successful offering. This represented separating good and evil. It represented goodness, the right half, subjugating evil, the left half. Now, the Bible informs us that Abraham cut the heifer and the ram, but he left the birds uncut. He left the altar and went to sleep. And as he slept, two things happened. One, black birds of prey came down and pecked at the offering. Two, Abraham was told in a dream that his descendants would suffer for 400 years as sojourners in a foreign land. Let's consider the meaning. By failing to cut these two, because Abraham did not cut the dove in two as he should have, birds of prey came down, defiling the sacrifices. What did this represent? It had the effect of acknowledging that Satan could invade, claim possession over his incomplete, unseparated offering, which represented his heart. Through this failure in the symbolic offering, all the conditions that God wanted to restore through it were lost. As a consequence, Abraham's descendants had to suffer oppression and slavery for 400 years in Egypt. Why? Why 400 years? Because the period to prepare for Abraham to come was a 10-generational, 400-year period. By Abraham's failure, that period was lost, claimed also by Satan, and had to be restored through the 400 years of Abraham's descendants. Moreover, the providence of restoration centered on Abraham was now prolonged through the 3 generations of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3 generations of the third family were necessary to fulfill this providential responsibility. Now, suddenly, God asks Abraham to offer his son as a burnt offering. What is the significance here? After Abraham failed in his symbolic offering, God commanded him to sacrifice his only son Isaac as a burnt offering. Let's consider the poignant story. Through this, God began a new dispensation for the purpose of restoring through indemnity Abraham's failure. What does the Bible tell us about this situation? God had promised Abraham, your descendants will multiply like the stars in the sky, like the sands of the ocean, and that I will bless all humanity through your descendants. But Abraham was becoming old and had no heir. So his wife, beloved wife Sarah, convinced Abraham to have a child through her handmaiden, Hagar. And his first son, Ishmael, was born. Now, later, after the birth of Ishmael, and by the way, there was a struggle that began there because as the baby grew inside her womb, Hagar became proud of the fact that she was productive for Abraham and her mistress was not. And according to the Bible, Sarah became jealous and the struggle began to ensue. But now angels appear to Abraham and tell him that he will conceive his own son. Abraham laughs. That's ridiculous. He's old, his wife is old. Sarah's listening outside and she laughs, thinking that it's impossible. But 9 months later, God had the last laugh. And Isaac was born, and Isaac, the name means he laughs or laughter. So Isaac was God's last laugh for Abraham and Sarah. But now God asks Abraham to offer the very son that God has given him, to give him back, to give him up, to put God in the center of his life. This is a struggle that many people of faith have gone through. When we ourselves, our talents or abilities or opportunities or blessing or material, when we felt called to make a sacrifice of those things for a greater good or a greater purpose. This was the position that Abraham was in. So through this, a new dispensation began. Let's investigate. Why did God work with Abraham again, first of all, and having him offer Isaac? Adam, when he failed, didn't get a second chance. Noah's family, when it failed, didn't get a second chance. Why is Abraham's family continuing with the providence of restoration? First, the number 3 is the completion. It represents completion. Since the providence to lay the foundation for the Messiah in Abraham's family was the third or completion stage dispensation, then God could work through the principle to complete it in this third stage. And therefore, by prolonging through 3 generations of this third family, God could continue his providence. That's the significance of the third family and God working through it. Secondly, Satan had attacked both Adam and his son Cain, working through 2 generations. defiling the family over the course of 2 generations. Hence, according to the principle of restoration, through indemnity, God could work to take back Abraham and his son Isaac over the course of 2 generations. This providence of taking back can also be seen in the process by which God called Abraham. Now you remember that in calling Noah as the family to inherit the mission of Adam's family, that God called Noah as a descendant of the 3rd son, Seth, who had taken Abel's position, representing God's side. So God, working through that, could call Noah out of those generations. But when God called Abraham, he was not from the 2nd son or 3rd son's lineage. Here's why. In the family of Noah, unlike Adam's family, where Satan had worked through Cain, his representative, to destroy Abel, representing God's side. But in Noah's family, it was God's representative, Ham, who'd been invaded by Satan. Therefore, to restore through indemnity or take back and rebuild that foundation of the 2nd son, then God called Abraham from the 1st son's lineage, Shem. And if you read the Bible carefully, Abraham was born from a successive number of 1st sons, and his father was an idol maker representing the satanic side. But by calling someone from that position and having him make conditions to restore the position of the 2nd son, God was taking back this earlier condition. The 3rd reason why God could continue working with Abraham's family was that even though Abraham had failed, God could raise him up, giving him another chance based on the accumulated merit of Abel's successful foundation of faith and Noah's successful foundation of faith and their faithful hearts. So let's consider how Abraham offered Isaac and what it meant. Abraham struggled for 3 days to walk what was ultimately a very short distance to the Mount of Moriah to offer his son. And in obedience to God, he raised the knife, ready to slay his son. The Bible says an angel appeared and blocked his hand and said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad, for now I know that you fear God." So God was not looking for the blood of Abraham's son, but looking for faith. And when Abraham showed faith, this blood sacrifice became unnecessary as a condition for restoration. We should remember this for 2,000 years later, when God sent his son. If a condition of faith had been made, then the blood sacrifice would not have been necessary. In fact, going back to Abraham, when Abraham showed faith and Isaac showed faith, Isaac was not a baby. He trusted his father in a way that Ham had not trusted his father. Isaac faithfully went up the mountain. "What's the offering, Father?" And his dad said, "God will provide." But eventually, as his hands were bound and he willingly laid himself on the altar, Isaac knew and had to completely trust his father. When this condition of faithfulness was showed, the Bible says that a ram nearby had his horns caught in a thicket. And Abraham and Isaac together offered that animal in the place of Isaac. Isaac's sacrifice was not necessary. 2,000 years later, as Jesus was being offered up to go to the cross, the Emperor Pilate stood up Jesus and a common robber and thief, Barabbas, and gave the people a chance to free the son and put the ram in the position of sacrifice in his place. But unfortunately, tragically, because the condition of faith was not there, it became, unfortunately, a sacrifice of blood. And the ram was set free and the son put to death, in that case 2,000 years later. Let's continue. The consequences of Abraham's offering. With absolute faith, obedience, and loyalty, Abraham was zealous to do God's will. His resolute action lifted him to the position of having already sacrificed Isaac. Therefore, he completely separated Satan from Isaac. Isaac could stand in the position of being claimed by God. Now, because Abraham succeeded in his offering of Isaac, the providence of restoration in Abraham's family could be carried on by whom? By the one who showed faith in his father, Isaac himself. let's consider Isaac's position and his symbolic offering. Abraham's first offering ended in failure. Therefore, the providence was prolonged and his descendants had to restore through indemnity the 400 years. But now, through the success of Isaac's offering, Abraham and Isaac attained inseparable oneness in their fidelity to God's will. Likewise, after the divine mission had passed from Abraham the father to Isaac the son, Abraham offered a ram together with his son, which had been provided by God as the substitute for Isaac. This then became the offering, the symbolic offering by which Isaac himself could stand as the central figure and restore the foundation of faith. In this way, Isaac, having inherited Abraham's mission, made the symbolic offering and restored through indemnity the foundation of faith. Let's now consider how the providence continued. If Abraham originally had not failed in his symbolic offering, then his sons, Isaac and his half-brother Ishmael, would have stood in the position of Cain and Abel. But because of Abraham's failure, that never took place. Now, let's go back to that time as the Bible describes, when Sarah and Hagar were arguing and struggling over their two sons and their position in the family. Abraham was frustrated, and Sarah demanded that Hagar be sent away. Abraham hesitated because he loved both of his sons. But God told him, "Do not fear to send away Hagar and her son, because I will make of him a great nation." And so he did send them away. And history and tradition tell us that out of Ishmael came the Arab people. And out of the Arab people, ultimately, the tradition of Islam. But here, even in today's world, we can see this unrestored relationship of brothers. Not restored in Abraham's family, and therefore all throughout history, the struggle of Israel and the Arab people continues to this day and threatens to explode in the Middle East. So, again, he who does not learn from the mistakes of history is doomed to repeat them. It's time for us to learn these things and go deeper. Let's continue. Because Abraham failed in the offering, God set up Isaac in the position of Abraham, and his sons, Esau and Jacob, took the positions originally intended for Ishmael and Isaac. So now, let's conclude by looking at the foundation of substance in the family of Abraham. To establish the foundation for the Messiah in Isaac's family now, the foundation of substance has to be laid next. Let's consider the process. For this purpose, Isaac's sons, Esau and Jacob, had to be placed in the positions of Cain and Abel, respectively, by making the substantial offering through uniting in heart, overcoming their fallen nature. They were responsible to fulfill the condition to remove the fallen nature and lay the foundation of substance. Now, the Bible tells us that Jacob and Esau were twins in the womb of their mother Rebekah, and they wrestled in the womb. And Rebekah prayed to understand what was happening, and that God spoke to her saying that two nations are in your womb, and they are to be divided in you, but the elder must serve the younger. Now we understand the earlier issue of whether it was predestination when the Bible says that God loved Jacob and hated Esau in the womb. It wasn't prejudice or predestination. It was the position of elder and younger son, respectively. So God told Rebekah that the elder son, who was to be Esau, who came out first, should humble himself and serve the younger, who was to be Jacob. Now, once again, Isaac's symbolic offering through the ram restored the natural world conditionally and symbolically restored human beings. On that foundation, a substantial offering was required. Before Esau and Jacob could make this offering, Jacob first had to fulfill the indemnity condition to restore the position of faithfulness, to inherit the faith of Isaac. Jacob had the responsibility to restore the birthright of the firstborn son. He cleverly obtained it from Esau in exchange for bread and a pottage of lentils. Here's the story. Esau the elder was a hunter, rough, tough, gruff, and hairy, and favored by his father as the elder son. Jacob the younger was a shepherd, closer to his mother because of God's guidance, and he was more refined and internal and spiritually aware. Now one day Esau comes home from the fields hungry. He's famished, and Jacob, his brother, is making a pottage of lentils with bread. Esau asks for some, but Jacob requires that he give his birthright in exchange. Now many have accused Jacob of having stolen the birthright, but he didn't steal it. He just got a very good price. Let's continue. So Jacob, through this, put himself in the position to inherit the elder son's position, even though he was born as the younger. Now, because Jacob valued the birthright and worked to reclaim it, God had Isaac bless him. Here's the story. Isaac became old and was near death, and he called his elder son to bring him a final meal in preparation for giving the blessing. As Esau went out into the field, Jacob's mother, Rebekah, who had overheard, called Jacob, dressed him like his brother, put on a woolly lamb's skin in order that he feel hairy like his brother, and Jacob went in front of his old blind